Hello everyone, Magdalena here, Hormones Balance, and in today's short video, I would love to talk to you about what are the symptoms of estrogen dominance, many of which I think are going to be pretty surprising for you to hear. So before I dive into the actual symptoms, I'm going to talk about symptoms of high estrogen as well as low progesterone because they're slightly different from each other. And then some of you might have seen that we have opened up the doors to the preview of my, I think, iconic program that we just launched called Estrogen Reset. And I'm going to talk about it, how do you get into previewing the program in just a second. So I'm curious, as you listening to this, how many of you are experiencing these symptoms? So for those of you who are not, if it's not too personal, then go ahead and share. And hello there, Gail. Gail is a very regular on my Facebook Lives, which is awesome. So, and my colleague Jean is here with us today, so that's she's going to be helping us out. So I'm just going to dive straight in. So let's talk about what are the symptoms, and more importantly, what I would like to do after that second part of this video, I'm going to talk about how can you reverse those symptoms, okay? And in case you're new to my work, I have been struggling with estrogen dominance myself for many, many years. For most of them, I didn't even know that that's what it was. I also didn't realize, it became very apparent to me that almost every woman I come across experiences estrogen dominance at some point in her life. And the reason, so as you can tell, this work is super personal to me, not only because I feel like I maybe have dodged the bullet on many of them. Many of my family members, both on mom's side and dad's side, have either been struggling or passed away from breast, ovarian, or uterine cancers. And so, not surprisingly, I have inherited two sets of genes from both parents that have made my ability to detoxify and metabolize estrogen properly in the body very, very compromised. I basically have an inability, so my efficiency of clearing estrogen is about 30% compared to a normal person. Both the SNPs from both sides are what we call mutated. And it's a very disempowering thought if you think about it. The cool thing is that when you take care of yourself, then you can actually reverse all of them. So whatever I'm going to read here, it might sound quite daunting at some point, but the most important thing I want you to take away from here, Shazia Ashraf from Nairobi, Kenya. Hi there. That's a beautiful place. I've been to Nairobi just passing. Such an amazing place. And I wonder, Shazia, whether you guys have problems with estrogen dominance there as much as we do have here. So let me start off by saying that let me just cover symptoms of high estrogen first, and then we're going to be talking about low progesterone after that, because they are both correlated to, they're both in the group of estrogen dominance. And I'm also going to talk about men. So it could be that even though I don't really work with men, but a lot of the stuff it will relate to men, and many of you are going to be your partners, your husbands, your boyfriends, who brothers, fathers who experience this. So anyway, so let's cover women first. The very first one that is super obvious is PMS and dysmenorrhea. Dysmenorrhea means that it's a terrible pain that starts typically 7 days before your period. PMS, premenstrual syndrome, of course, can have like 50 different symptoms, right? So the most common ones will be feeling bloated, having a headache before, having a terrible mood, of course, having a lot of pain, bloating, feeling really tired, moody, right? All of those. And, I think PMS is such a common symptom. And by the way, if you're thinking what's the banging, the background is because we do have a pretty strong rain. And I won't be surprised if it's going to be hail in a few minutes, because that's what's been happening here in Colorado this year. We've just been having like no spring rather. Okay, so we are so accustomed, we're so used to PMS being like a normal thing for women. It's almost unthinkable for us to imagine that having a period come and go without the whole body falling apart, without us shutting down and taking time out and being on painkillers, is almost impossible. I want to assure you that when your hormones are in good check, and more importantly, how you're breaking down those, especially estrogens, and you have sufficient progesterone, your PMS is going to be minimal. Your period comes and goes. Of course, there's going to be changes because, if you've seen those charts, you are high, it's your mid-cycle, then kind of drops, it goes back again, and then everything just dips really crashes before your period. So obviously there's going to be a change, but it doesn't have to be debilitating. And there's a lot of things that we can do, and that's why Estrogen Reset was created for that. So another very common symptom of high estrogen, or estrogen dominance is heavy bleeding and what we call menarche, right? That's the medical term for that. And that often goes in hand with women having fibroids. And again, you know, when you go and see an allopathic doctor, what are you told? Go on birth control pills, and if the fibroids get out of control, then go and remove your uterus. My hope and my whole vision for doing this work, you know, is that maybe in 10, 15 years time, although they say it takes about 40 years for us to completely abolish everything that we believe in the medicine and have a different view on things. So I hope it's not gonna take us 40 years. I hope it's gonna take us like about 10 years to realize that when a woman has fibroids, endometriosis, to be suggesting to remove her uterus as a first line of treatment is kind of barbaric. The same way, I'm gonna talk about this in a second, having thyroid nodules, same thing. What does your doctor say? These nodules we can't really, you know, define. They could be carcinogenic, but they're not. As a prevention, let's just remove the thyroid, and then you're on medication for the rest of your life, right? So then also women who are experiencing postmenopausal bleeding, for example, could also be due to estrogen dominance. Little things like having spider or varicose veins, you know, like on your face, especially like around the nose. Many women will have that around their chin, right? You know, those little broken veins. That is also, it could be a sign of estrogen dominance. Cellulite and keeping your weight around your waist, right? I tend to be very much of a pear shape. If I stand behind here, I'm not too far. I can actually show you because I'm connected to a microphone. But you know, I'm very much of a. I've got the butt. I've got the hips, right? And that's typically women who carry a lot of weight around their hips, around the waist. Sorry, not the waist, around the hips, around your thigh. That is very common sign of estrogen dominance. And interestingly, on the other hand, as we talk about body shapes, on the other hand, women who carry around their waist here weight would be what we call the apple shapes, right? Will typically be is due to a metabolic disorder. So it's typically blood sugar balance problems, pre-diabetes, diabetes, high testosterone levels. So it's really interesting when you see a shape of a woman, how you can tell what kind of hormonal imbalance she's suffering from. Another symptom, which is very common, is a breast cyst or fibrocystic breast. So breast cysts would also be, in other words, called lumps. And I don't need to tell you how terrifying it is for you to find a lump on your breast, right? And especially the lump only occurs on one side, not on both sides. If on both sides, it's most likely it's not breast cancer. But I think any woman, you know, who finds a lump, I don't need to tell you, I'm sure you've experienced that before, when you just go, oh my God. And then the first thing is, how do I get this diagnosed, right? And then you've got all these varying options about, do I do a mammogram? Do I do a thermogram? Do I do nothing at all, right? Doctors push you, they scare you, and all of that stuff. Is mammogram really as benign as they say, or is it really terrible? Is it really radiation? All of those things. And I don't know about you, but my biggest fear in life always has been of having breast cancer. I don't know why. This is even before I knew about estrogen dominance. That's always been my biggest fear. If you ask me what's my biggest fear, that's been my biggest fear. And I think subconsciously, I've been drawn to doing this work as in research first, but then also on myself, is because, and I think that's the reason why I am, as a 46-year-old woman today, I feel better than I've ever felt before, and I haven't had breast lumps for a very long time. So for people who are very predispositioned, such as myself, you know, you might be experiencing the kind of thing where you kind of slip a little bit, right? You do a little bit of the silly things, like, example for me would be, I'll go to Portugal and, you know, have the wine and have a bit of cheese, and gluten sneaks in back again into my diet, right? After 1 month, I come back and I've got lumps on both sides of my boobs, right? And I'm thinking, my gosh, I mean, some of these women who live there in Portugal, they do this day in and day out. They do it for years and they're fine. I have to remind myself that's to do with my genetics, and I just have to honor that. And I don't want to be one of those people who go like, oh, but I want to live my life. I don't want to live my life and then get breast cancer when I'm 48 years old, you know? And that's really when your life falls apart. So anyway, so fibrocystic breasts and lumpy boobs is sign of estrogen dominance. And I think it's an early one, which again, you go and see a doctor. A lot of times you're told, you know, that's all benign. It's not a big deal. Come back in 6 months' time, let's recheck it. In the meantime, why not do something to change it? And I don't know about you, but this whole wait and see attitude pisses me off. Like, wait for what? Why not do something preventatively so they completely go away and you never have to deal with that, the fear, the doubts, you know, of dealing with that. And it is the estrogen metabolites, which I'm going to be talking about it in the next Facebook Lives, probably tomorrow. I want to explain a little bit more about how estrogen dominance happens, how the estrogens are broken down, because it's not the level of estrogen that is the problem. It's how we break down those estrogens is the issue here. And is the metabolites of estrogens, I just call it the dirty estrogens just for the simplicity of it, is the dirty estrogens that are causing the growth of these malignant tissues, such as fibrocystic breasts, such as lumps in your boobs, okay? Another one will be irritability, mood swings, and anxiety, especially that happens before your period. That's a very common one. Headaches and migraines before your period, very, very common. But also for women with low progesterone, I'm going to talk about it in a second, would often be experiencing headaches mid-cycle, okay? And that's because your progesterone just drops way too low and there's too much of estrogen to oppose it. For women who, okay, so another one is thyroid nodules. And similarly to to lumpy boobs or fibroids, is the dirty estrogens that are causing the growth of the malignant tissue. And so thyroid nodules is exactly the same thing. And I don't know about you, but many years, like, I wonder how many of you here have been dealing with thyroid nodules. But it's like one of those super frustrating moments when you go and see a doctor and they do a sonogram and they go, oh yeah, you've got 3 nodules. One of them is really big. Come back in 6 months' time, let's look at this again. And if it doesn't improve, we do a biopsy. And if it's inconclusive, we're going to remove your thyroid. Well, guess what? And then you're on meds for the rest of your life, right? And your life is never going to be the same. It might be 90%, you know, good, but a lot of times, and you're dependent on meds. And I don't know about you, but to me, that was never an appealing option. And so I just had a sonogram done about a year ago, and just to see my thyroid. And the tech said, she says, you know, I'm not supposed to make comments because that's reserved for the doctor to conclude, but I will just tell you, as a person with Hashimoto's, you have a beautiful thyroid, she said. So that was funny. If you have a history of certain types of cancer, so let's talk about some of the estrogenic cancers, and that will be, actually, before I talk about cancers, let me just cover the other more superficial stuff. So feeling bloated, puffiness, and a lot of water retention. You know, for those of you who you have a ring on your finger and you can't take it off certain parts of your month because everything just basically, you retain a lot more water than normal, and that's just water weight. That's oftentimes is due to estrogen dominance. And if you look at your cycle, oftentimes that either happens mid-cycle or just before your period. So again, water retention. And it's really interesting because if you look at estrogen and progesterone, they're like 2 dancing partners, you know? And one does, for example, estrogen build bones, progesterone kind of builds the structure for the bone, and estrogen builds up the uterine lining, progesterone maintains it, right? The same thing goes with water retention, where estrogen helps to retain the water, because you need that plumpness of your skin. If you don't have enough estrogen, your skin is just gonna sag. Your uterus is gonna start sagging. Everything starts sagging. Your boobs start sagging, right? There's testosterone and estrogen typically are the main causes behind it. So the same thing with water retention. So estrogen helps to bring the water into the cells. Progesterone, on the other hand, is what takes the water out of the cells, right? So the balance between those two is so important. And so water retention, you have just too much estrogen or too many of those estrogen metabolites. Let's see, endometriosis and painful periods. I mean, endometriosis is one of the most painful conditions I've known. And my heart goes out to women who suffer from it, because it really is debilitating. It wrecks a woman's life. A lot of young women have it. I belong to a number of different Facebook groups where women deal with that endometriosis, and all they've been told is they're put on birth control pills. If that doesn't help, their uterus is being removed, and many of them post 6 months later saying, I thought by removing my uterus, and mind you, those are women who are in their top reproductive years, who will never have a child ever, right? And her sex life is never going to be the same. Her hormonal balance is never going to be the same. And so they have the uterus removed, and then they say, but I'm still having so much pain in my abdomen. Well, guess what? Endometriosis, the endometrial tissue, is one that doesn't just grow around the uterus. It can grow straight into your intestines, small intestine, large intestine. It start growing around your liver. They have even found endometrial tissue in the lungs and in the brain, which is crazy. But that's the reason why. And guess what? And there's a lot we can do to prevent it, because, again, the growth of the endometrial tissue happens because of dirty estrogens. I mentioned fibroids, so that's another one that is in the women's reproductive years. I think the statistic is like 70% of women in their reproductive years, and when they're still cycling, will experience having fibroids. And again, you know, when you see an allopathic doctor, it's almost like it's a normal thing to have fibroids. Wait and see, come back, doesn't resolve, we remove it. And you know, I mean, if you have a fibroid that's bothering you, that's causing a lot of pain, that's causing horrendous bleeding, I am all the way for do anything quickly to, you know, to address it. But remember that removing a fibroid ain't gonna address the root cause of a problem, which is estrogen dominance. And guess what? You remove the fibroid, but then if the estrogen dominance part isn't managed properly, it will come back with a vengeance somewhere else, whether it's in the form of fibrocystic breasts, lumpy boobs, or something more serious like estrogenic cancers, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. So fibroids can be completely shrunk. I had a woman who used to work for me in my team. Her name is Darlene. She wrote a big blog post for me. She was diagnosed with fibroids. And because she was already past her reproductive years, she was going towards perimenopause. She says, you know, my OBGYN says I might as well remove my uterus. So she's like, should I do it? I said, Darlene, you work for me, you know, with me. You know my stuff, right? She wasn't particularly implementing a lot of the things that I teach, which, by the way, is one of the criteria now for me when we hire for our team. We want women to live this life. So when you guys write to our customer support, these women live this life. Like, we don't pretend, you know, we actually live this, so they can actually share their own personal experiences with you. And so the same way, anyway, so Darlene implemented a number of the different things that I thought. She got off gluten, she got off dairy, she started doing some of the supplements. And long and behold, within 3 months, her fibroids shrunk so much so. By the way, she wrote an article for us. If you go to my website and just look for Darlene, her blog post will show up. Her fibroids shrunk so much so they didn't completely disappear within the 3 months. But think about 3 months. It probably took her, you know, 3 years, 5 years for these fibroids to grow. 3 months to shrink them so much so that when she went back for a checkup, her OBGYN says, what have you been doing that it shrunk so much? And then they decided they're gonna save her uterus. And you might think, well, what's the big deal, right? I mean, she's already in a perimenopause. But I feel like, I don't know about, but you know, I think it's just so myopic to remove an organ without asking the question, why is it happening in the first place, and preventing the root cause, like where's the problem coming from, and nabbing that in the bud. Another one, which is really interesting, is a bit superficial, but I'm going to talk about actually 3 more, and then we're going to talk about the cancer. So gallbladder problems, really fascinating. The gallbladder is a little bit of a chicken and egg situation with the gallbladder, because the gallbladder produces bile, and bile binds up estrogens, those dirty estrogens, and carries them out through your digestion, small intestine, large intestine, and then you poop it out. So bile really helps to bind up estrogens. And so it's a chicken and egg situation in the sense that women who have estrogen dominance tend to have more gallstones, which can create a lot of problems. And then, you know, that you have the gallbladder problems, and then you end up having your gallbladder removed because there's so many gallstones and everything is backed up, and it hurts like crazy, and then they remove it, right? But on the other hand, is also the other way is, and I wonder how many of you experience this, if you don't mind sharing that, if this is not too personal for you. We've had many women tell us that it's after the gallbladder was removed that they started experiencing very pronounced estrogen dominant symptoms. And the reason why that happens is because of what I explained. The gallbladder is removed. You don't have sufficient bile storage, because the bile is produced in the liver. It's stored in the gallbladder. You don't have sufficient bile to, you know, do the work in terms of the bile helps to emulsify fats, right? So that when you basically eat something fatty, like great olive oil, and you're doing like a bit of keto diet, or you're having a piece of meat with some fat on it, it's all good stuff, right? That is the bile that binds, that emulsifies the fats, and the fat, by the way, is used as a precursor. That's where cholesterol comes from, and the dietary cholesterol is the precursor for creating all your steroid hormones. So your estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, testosterone, cortisol, progesterone, all come from cholesterol, the HDL, the good cholesterol, right? So when you have your gallbladder removed, it's really fascinating how many women then report within 3 to 6 months having pronounced symptoms of estrogen dominance, and many of them that I'm reading out here. Two more that I want to cover. Brown facial discoloration. So you basically, it's your melasma, and so a lot of times it happens above your lips. Some women it's around here, and this is one of the symptoms I'm still struggling with till today. Even though I feel like my estrogen dominance is well under control, I'm still suffering from a lot of discoloration on the sides. I'm wearing some makeup right now, so you won't see it, but there's some videos I'm planning to post in the future so you can see what I'm talking about. And again, like, you go and see your esthetician, and they will start bleaching your, different parts of your skin, right? And my challenge with that is that, and by the way, my melasma started ever since I went on birth control pills, and this is many, many, many years ago. And I remember my that time husband said to me, wow, it looks like you're growing a mustache, because I started having so many brown spots right above. So from far, it looked as if I was having hair growing there. So, pretty, not pretty, right? But again, when you address estrogen dominance, instead of bleaching the skin, there is, go more upstream, right? Like if you live by a house by a river that's got crappy water that's polluted, right? What are you gonna do? Are you gonna put like filters right there, or are you gonna go and find out who's the factory that is screwing up your water in the first place, right? Probably the second. And the last thing I wanna just mention is hive and allergies. Why? Because having excess estrogen is hugely inflammatory. As too much estrogen is inflammatory. So, I don't have evidence to that, but anything, I feel like inflammations, pretty much anything. So I won't be surprised if a lot of body pains and aches also could be related to estrogen dominance. But we know for sure that allergies, especially now you go into spring, if you're doing with a lot of allergies, that could be due to estrogen dominance, and so are hives. And so that's for women. And I also want to mention that for men, you have two symptoms that are very symptomatic, very representative of estrogen dominance. And that is, number one is prostate issues, and number two is men boobs. And men boobs and men having breast cancer is another cancer that's actually on the rise amongst men. And you might say, like a lot of men you see who are like big beer drinkers. Well, guess what? Beer is made from hops. Hops is highly estrogenic. And if the person is having compromised liver and gut, and you're not breaking down those estrogens very well, then this is what causes men boob growth and prostate. So I also want to cover, before I wrap up for today, I want to keep this call fairly short, and then I'm going to get to your questions in just a second. But by the way, you guys, I'm going to be doing Q&As on Sunday, or FAQs rather, frequently asked questions. So post your questions here and I'm going to answer them. I kind of want to stay on topic. So tomorrow I'm going to be talking about the different types of estrogen dominance. Then I think on Saturday I'm going to talk about superfoods and anti-foods to estrogen dominance, okay? So let me talk about symptoms of low progesterone would be you can't fall asleep or midnight waking, very symptomatic, infertility, miscarriages, especially in the first trimester, mid-cycle spotting, so like the brown spotting you might get in the middle of a cycle when you're ovulating, anxiety, restlessness, mood swing, and hot flashes. Interesting, low progesterone can also be causing hot flashes, which is one of the biggest symptoms that ladies in our community are complaining about. So I would love to invite you to our Estrogen Reset program. And what we're starting off with is a preview. Jean, if you could post the link to the opt-in page. Once you give us your name and email, we'll start sending you emails for 5 days, and basically showing you what the program looks like on the inside, and that's completely free. Like how those online summits work when you have like 2-3 talks every day for 24 hours open up? We do exactly the same thing. You're gonna learn a ton. You're gonna learn a lot of things you can do straight away, including those foods and superfoods, and I'll give you the list in a second what you're gonna learn. And if you feel like you wanna go into the full program, do so. There's different options there's an option for joining. I made the program super inexpensive, you guys. It's only $147. For the amount of content you're gonna get and for the amount of work that went into this and the experience you're gonna get out of this, we have specific protocols for fibroids, specific protocols for lumpy boobs, for heavy periods, for irregular periods, having no periods. As I forgot, those are some of the other symptoms here as well. All of those are covered in specific protocols. So on day one, you're gonna be getting a video that I'm talking about my struggles with estrogen dominance and how I manage it today, more details. And I'm gonna be talking about the symptoms of estrogen dominance, which I covered most of them today. On day two, we're gonna be talking about what is estrogen dominance, the 3 different types of estrogen dominance, which is really interesting. And then you're gonna be hearing healing stories of different women and how others have done it. Day 3, I think, is gonna be one of the most important lectures, and that is gonna be about the function of the liver and how the liver helps you detoxify estrogen. And then on day 4, we're gonna be talking about sugar balance and sugar cravings and how that impacts estrogen dominance. And then on day 5, it's gonna be about superfoods and anti-foods that make estrogen dominance worse. So if you think this is something that interests you and is gonna be helpful for you, then head over to the link that Gina's gonna post in just a second. And it's for those of you who are, if you're not seeing it yet, it's hormonesbalance.com/ER, like emergency room. It stands for Estrogen Reset. Wow, we're having all this very international crowd today from Vancouver, Laura, and Sips from Texas, Lisa from the UK. We have Sida Mohammed from Ethiopia. That's on the list of things to go, Sida, is to go to Ethiopia. I love Ethiopian food. And then Shirley from Montreal. Fibroids, we have Lydia, Philippines, Anna, Isantaneda. Okay, my aunt is watching, I think. My aunt Elizabeth. Sibonetta is asking, could you include something about estrogen deficiency? So that's going to be more in the realm of menopause and perimenopause symptoms. And Simonetta, I will cover that in the future, but today I really want to stay focused on estrogen dominance. Donna is asking, can you address thermography versus mammograms? Yeah, so it's an area that I feel it's a very sensitive area, I think, for me to talk about. And I want to encourage you to do a bit of research on that. But basically, thermography doesn't pick up cancers at a very early stage. And so that's one of the challenges. There's mammograms today that the radiation is so low, and there's a digital mammogram option as well, but they don't squeeze your boob, and it's not as brutal as it used to be in the past. So I think it's something that's worthwhile researching, Donna. Donna D is asking what determines which pathway estrogen takes, 2, 4, and 16. Yeah, it's a great question, Dana. So I talk about it in the liver lecture, actually, on day, I think that's going to be on day 3, yeah, so what Dana is asking is like how the estrogens are broken down, and they can go to 2, 4, 16, and then the liver is really important. And so that's why I'm going to talk about in that lecture what you can do to support your liver in order to break those estrogens well. She's also, Donna Toure is asking, how safe is a bioidentical hormone replacement? It is safe. The issue is, or the challenge is, to make sure that we break out those estrogens properly. And this is where you want to have a really well-functioning, healthy gut and a well-functioning liver, because that's when the breaking down of estrogens happens. Ashley's saying, I have them all the time. I'm assuming you're referring to symptoms. Okay. Hey, you guys, I need to jump on a call. I'm already 5 minutes late, so I'm going to jump off today. Thank you so much for all your comments. I really appreciate it. I would love to see you tomorrow. I'm going to be on at 10 o'clock Pacific, and that's going to be 11, 12, 1 o'clock Eastern, and then we're going to continue from there. So come on over, and if those questions I can't answer, Jean, let's put them on a spreadsheet, and we'll cover that on Sunday when I'm going to be doing FAQs. All right, everyone, have a lovely rest of the evening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.